It was just past 1 in the morning on May 14, 1983, in Orange County, California. Officer Sterling and Sergeant Jaguar were on duty on the San Diego Freeway when they spotted a brown Toyota Celica driving erratically. They immediately pulled the car over and came face to face with the most wanted killer of the last 10 years. The man stood there, spilling beer on the ground and with his pants undone. He agreed to take a breathalyzer test, which he obviously failed. As they were about to arrest him for drunk driving, they felt something wasn't right. They were missing something big. Sergeant Jaguar checked the car and found something that would haunt him forever. A young guy in the passenger seat, lifeless. This was the scene that the killer hadn't recorded in his secret list, which had more than 67 victims on it. Randy Kraft was born on March 19, 1945, in Long Beach, California. He was the fourth child and only son of Opal Lee and Harold Herbert Kraft. Kraft's father had moved to California from Wyoming weeks after the American entry into World War II. He found employment as a production operative at Douglas Aircraft Company, where he was joined by his wife and 3 daughters. The Kraft family lived modestly, and Kraft's mother took several jobs. To make ends meet, Kraft's mother took on multiple jobs, starting as a seamstress in a Westminster garment factory and later becoming a cook at a local school. Despite her efforts to provide for her family, Opal Kraft always made time for her children. In 1948, the Krafts relocated to Westminster, Orange County, where Kraft attended Midway City Elementary School, and his mother was a member of the PTA. His intelligence was evident to classmates and teachers. By 1957, Kraft was deemed intelligent enough to attend accelerated classes at 17th Street Junior High School. After graduating from high school in 1963, he enrolled at Clement Men's College in Clement, where he was actively involved in numerous activities. He joined the Reserve Officers Training Course and developed a keen interest in politics. In 1964, he publicly supported the Vietnam War and helped campaign for Barry Goldwater Republican presidential candidature, and he also worked at a local gay bar and was so busy that he started taking Valium to help with his stomach and headache fever. Over time, his friends got worried about how much medicine he was using. His grades started to drop, began drinking, played poker all night, and even failed his econometrics class, which delayed his graduation by 8 months. 1968 was a big year for Randy. He got his economics degree and shifted his political views from right-wing. To more democratic, even working hard for Robert Kennedy. That same year, he joined the US Air Force, aced the tests, and showed he was really smart with an IQ of 129. He got sent to Edwards Air Force Base in Kern County, California, a place with high security. In 1969, Randy's life changed dramatically when he told his family and friends he was gay. They accepted him, but the military didn't, and he was forced to leave, feeling down. He went back. He became a bartender and later a truck driver in Huntington Beach. He also taught courses at California State University, Long Beach, where he met Jeff Graves, a younger guy from Minnesota. They started dating, and it seemed like Randy was getting his life back on track. However, he had a dark secret. In March 1970, while wandering around Huntington Beach, Randy met 13-year-old Joseph Alvin Fancher, who had run away from home. Randy invited him to live together, which seemed nice, but Randy had evil intentions after bringing Joseph to his apartment. He drugged and attacked him. Joseph managed to escape while Randy was at work. A passerby saw Joseph's bad state and called for help. Joseph was taken to the hospital, where he told the police about being drugged and beaten by Randy. However, he didn't mention the abuse. The police went to Randy's apartment without a warrant. They were afraid of losing their jobs and decided not to press charges, leaving Randy free to offend again. The end of 1971, the police found an unidentified decomposed body on Ortega Highway. The victim was Wayne Joseph Duquette, a 30-year-old bartender. The autopsy indicated he died from alcohol poisoning in September of that year. The investigation stalled with no leads on Wayne's clothes, belongings, or his killer. On December 26, 1972, police on Highway 405 in Seal Beach found 20-year-old sailor Edward Daniel Moore's body was tied at the wrists and ankles, had a hit mark on his face, and bite marks. Shockingly, a sock was stuffed in his rectum. It was clear he'd been thrown from a moving vehicle. 6 weeks later, on February 6th, police found a man's body aged between 17 and 25 near the Terminal Island Freeway. He couldn't be identified, but like Edward Moore, he had a sock stuffed similarly. Police were certain the same killer was behind these crimes. However, the culprit remained at large as more victims appeared on April 9, 17-year-old Kevin Clark Bailey was found beside a road in Huntington Beach. He had been castrated and sodomized. 13 days later, another dismembered body was found and given the name John Doe on July 30th. 20-year-old Ronnie Gene Weber was found strangled with Mark, suggesting he'd been restrained. He was hung before death. The year ended with another gruesome discovery on December 29. 23-year-old art student Vincent Crossmesters was found dead in the San Bernardino Mountains. He was openly bisexual, as with several previous victims. One of the victim's socks had been forced into his rectum. Mesters' hands had been severed from his body and were never found. By November 1974, 5 more victims had been found beside or close to major roadways in Southern California. 3 of the victims had been conclusively linked to the same killer. 2 of these victims, 20-year-old Malcolm Eugene Little and 19-year-old James Dale Reeves, had each been found beside a freeway with foreign objects inserted into their bodies. The body of the third victim, 18-year-old Marine Roger Edward Dickerson, bore evidence of bite marks, much like several earlier victims. On January 3, 1975, Croft abducted and murdered a 17-year-old high school student named John Neris was last seen boarding a bus in Long Beach. His strangled body was found the following day discarded at Sunset Beach with a foreign object protruding from his anus. Track marks along the beach close to where his body was found suggested that 2 individuals had carried Larry's body into the water. 2 weeks after this murder, the body of a 21-year-old named Craig Janatas was found discarded in the parking lot of the Golden Sails Hotel, near the Pacific Coast Highway and Loynes Drive in Long Beach. Janatas had been strangled to death with a length of string, possibly a shoelace, by January 1975. A total of 14 victims whose bodies had been found discarded across 4 separate counties over the previous 3 years had been linked to the same killer. All the victims had been Caucasian males with similar physical characteristics. In 1975, Keith Crotwell and his friend Kent May left home to hitchhike south. They were unaware of the fate awaiting them. Croft lured the 2 men from a Long Beach parking lot into his Ford Mustang. The youths were given beer and Valium as Croft drove in a random, aimless manner around Belmont Shore and Seal Beach. The police started searching right away, and soon they got a tip from 2 young people who said they saw Crotwell and May in a black and a white Mustang was seen speeding into a parking lot. The driver quickly leaned over, opened the passenger door, and pushed May out onto the ground. He was almost out of it, probably from drinking or drugs. They saw Crotwell slumped over the driver's shoulder before the car sped off into the night. A month later, Crotwell's head was found at a pier near Long Beach Harbor. The police scoured the city for clues to find the driver. They eventually got a name: Randy Croft. On May 1st. He was questioned and admitted picking up Cromwell. However, he claimed he left him at a CF and knew nothing more. He also said his car later crashed and he had to call a tow truck. Jeff, still his partner, backed up his story. The detectives didn't believe him, but the Los Angeles County prosecutors wouldn't charge him due to the lack of evidence and because they couldn't find the rest of Crotwell's body or determine how he died. Therefore, Jeff was free again. After a brief respite, his crime spree intensified. On December 31st, he abducted 22-year-old Mark Hall, tied him to a tree in a canyon, and subjected him to unspeakable abuse. Croft cut off Hall's private parts, stuffed them into his rectum, burned him with a lighter on his chest, nose, and cheeks, gouged out his eyes, and then attacked him with a broken bottle. Croft then proceeded to suffocate Hall by stuffing leaves and dirt into his throat. The police found Mark's body and were shocked. The autopsy revealed he was alive for much of this ordeal. This led the police to profile the killer as highly intelligent, methodical, and organized. He was possibly with a military background, noting the use of surgical tape on several victims' noses, a technique used in the military to prevent body decomposition after death. In January 1976, investigators from different parts of Southern California gathered in Orange County to discuss how to proceed with the search. Meanwhile, Croft lived a peaceful life for the following months. He ended things with Jeff Grays and soon found new love in Jeff Seelig, a 19-year-old baker's apprentice. They moved to Laguna Hills, promised each other forever, and shared a passion for threesomes, often picking up people from highways for this. During this time, Croft wasn't violent, and it seemed his relationship had quenched his thirst for blood. He went nearly a year without committing any crimes until he struck again on December 10th, killing 19-year-old Paul Joseph Fuchs. Fuchs's body was never found. His name was on Kraft's list of victims. After that, Kraft kept a low profile, but on April 16, 1978, he strangled Scott Michael Hughes after drugging him with Valium and removed one of his testicles. Hughes's body was found fully clothed except for his shoelaces. On June 11th, 23-year-old Roland Gerald Young was found near San Diego Highway mutilated and stabbed and thrown from a speeding vehicle. The body of Marine Richard Allen Keith was found in Moulton Parkway, showing clear signs of being tied up with strangulation as the cause of death and alcohol in his system. Despite relentless efforts, police failed to identify the killer or save the victims, including Keith Hother. Klingby Lear, 23-year-old, found beside Interstate 5 strangled with his shoelace. The hospital discovered he had ingested large amounts of paracetamol and alcohol and had burn marks on his chest. He died shortly after. In September 29, Richard Anthony Crosby, 20, was found dead under similar circumstances along Highway 71 in San Bernardino, having vanished the day before while hitchhiking. The California Strangler, as the media, in addition to having been castrated in Derbyton, had been violated with a foreign object and had suffered burns similar to those inflicted on victim Mark Hall 2 years previously. The cause of death was listed as suffocation. Kraft's attacks became less frequent, with the next one occurring in July 1979 on a highway. Donnie Harold Kreisel, a 20-year-old sailor, died from acute alcohol poisoning with signs. The body of 21-year-old British tourist Keith Anthony Jackson was found 2 months later in trash bags behind a Union 76 gas station in Long Beach. Jackson had been tied and tortured. Only his head, torso, and left leg were ever found. 2 weeks later, on September 14th, the body of 19-year-old Gregory Wallace Jolly was found in Lake Arrowhead. Jolly had been emasculated and his head and legs had his head, torso, and left leg was severed after death. Kraft's possessions were later found on February 18, 1980. Mark Allen Marsh's body was dumped near Templin Highway. He was last seen hitchhiking to Buena Park that summer. Kraft's job took him to Oregon, where he stayed in Portland and claimed 2 more victims. Michael Sean O'Phelan, a recent college graduate hitchhiking across the country, fell prey to Kraft, who drugged and strangled him. Kraft led him to his body, found near Salem the following day. Kraft is believed to have killed a man, estimated to be aged between 35 and 45 years old, whose body was found beside a freeway in the city of Woodburn. Kraft forced him to swallow a toxic level of pyrazmol before strangling him with a cord in September. Kraft returned to California and resumed his crimes, this time involving Robert Loggins, with whom he took incriminating photos. These photographs, which were subsequently found in Kraft's possession of the photographs, shows Loggins and Kraft's living room. Loggins is slumped fully clothed on his sofa, apparently intoxicated and in various nude pornographic postures. All these pictures depict Loggins with his eyes closed. It is unknown whether the victim was alive or dead when they were taken. On April 10, 1981, Kraft kidnapped Michael Cluck while hitchhiking. He brutally killed him with 31 blows to the head after assaulting him and dumped his body near Interstate 5 in Oregon. For months later, the partially clothed body of male prostitute Christopher Allen Williams was discovered in the San Bernardino Mountains. He had ingested several drugs and a paper towel stuffed in his nostrils, which caused him to choke on his own mucus. By early 1982, the relationship between Kraft and Seelig had become marred by frequent fights and episodes of temporary separation. In an effort to resolve their personal differences, the couple began attending weekly counseling sessions in Huntington Beach. These sessions began on June 22, 1982. The brutality of the killings escalated. Raymond Davis, just 14, disappeared while looking for his dog in Echo Park. 12 days later, he was found decomposed on the leaves, his wrists tied and a shoelace around his neck. Nearby, 16-year-old Robert Avala was found dead under similar circumstances. He had been strangled to death with a length of stereo speaker wire. Kraft did not kill again until, on November 1, 1982, he abducted and murdered a 24-year-old Modesto man named Honor Mikio Lane. Lane was last seen hitchhiking towards Orange County in search of work. His body was not found until January 1984, discarded on a hillside close to the town of Ramona, 4 weeks after Lane's murder. On the same day, the semi-nude body of 26-year-old Brian Witcher was dumped from a moving vehicle alongside the Interstate 5 freeway close to the city of Wilsonville, Oregon. Witcher had consumed high levels of both alcohol and drugs, but he died of asphyxiation on December 3, 1982. 29-year-old Anthony Joe Silveira vanished while hitchhiking. 2 weeks later, his body was found showing the same signs as previous victims. After this murder, Randy left on business, returning with Silveira's military jacket, ready for more victims. Before returning, he stopped in Michigan, staying at the Grand Rapids Hotel where he met Dennis Ortand. Christopher Schoenbonner drugged and assaulted them, then murdered Dennis by suffocation and Christopher by strangling him with a belt after inserting a pain into Christopher's urethra. Their bodies were found on December 9, 1982, in a field near the hotel. Kraft left Schoenbonner's keys and Silveira's jacket in his room for fleeing that month in Portland. He killed 19-year-old Lance Tax by he overdosed him with drugs and suffocated him with a sock in his windpipe. His body was discovered the following day, discarded alongside a rural road in Clackamas County, close to where the body of Witcher had been found just 2 weeks earlier. Eric Church, 21, was last seen hitchhiking from Orange County to Sacramento. He was found dead along Interstate 605, suffering similar tortures to Dennis and Christopher, but with signs of struggling against his restraints. He died from strangulation. On February 12, 1983, Kraft killed two Buena Park men, 18-year-old Jeffrey Nelson and 20-year-old Roger Duval. The two young men were last seen outside the house of a friend named Bryce Wilson shortly after midnight. They told Wilson they intended to purchase something to eat. Kraft continued these heinous acts, unaware that his luck was about to change dramatically. It was 1:10 a.m. on May 14th. In 1983, Officer Sterling and Sergeant Howard pulled over a brown Toyota Celica driving erratically on the San Diego Freeway in Orange County. They arrested the driver, Randy Kraft, for drunk driving after he failed sobriety tests. Kraft was also wearing his pants undone, which was odd. Meanwhile, Sergeant Howard approached the Celica and observed a young man. The man was slumped with his eyes closed in the vehicle's passenger seat, partially covered by a jacket. Several empty Moose Head beer bottles and an open prescription bottle of lorazepam tablets were strewn around his feet. Howard attempted to wake the man, receiving no response. Howard attempted to rouse the man by shaking his arm, noting the individual had a low body temperature upon checking for a pulse. Howard noted the man was dead with a ligature mark visible around his neck, lifting the jacket from the victim. Howard noted the victim's jeans had been opened to expose his genitalia. Additionally, the victim's hands had been bound with a shoelace, and his wrists bore evidence of welt marks. These were later identified as belonging to Terry Lee Gambrell, a 25-year-old Marine stationed at the El Toro Air Base. The victim had been strangled to death. Searching the car, Howard also found lots of damning evidence: alcohol, tranquilizers, various prescriptions, and an envelope with over 47 eerie photos showing young men in explicit, lifeless poses. There was blood on the passenger seat, but it wasn't Gambrell's since he had no open wounds. Howard had a hunch they had caught the California Strangler. They took the Kraft to the sheriff's department and searched his house, finding clothes and belongings of many young men whose bodies had been found over the years, along with more photos of unconscious or dead men. But the most shocking find was Kraft's coded list of 61 victims, including 4 double murders. Total 65 young men. Gambrell was not on the list since his death led to Kraft's arrest. After matching the list with discovered bodies, the count reached 67, clearly indicating Kraft needed to face the harshest penalty. The California Strangler was charged with 15 murders between December 1972 and May 1983. After over 700 witnesses were interviewed and more than 250 pieces of evidence were presented, the trial began on September 26, 1988. Kraft pleaded not guilty, but was convicted and sentenced to death on November 29, 1989. Following a moratorium in California, his sentence was changed to life without parole. While his capture brought peace to the region, it left an unresolved question: did he have an accomplice? Some details of Kraft's crime suggested he might not have acted alone. On one hand, forensic evidence in 2 cases revealed an extra set of fingerprints and DNA that didn't match the California Strangler. It was unlikely that Kraft could have moved bodies weighing up to 200 pounds alone. It was even more suspicious that he kept them in his car for long periods without anyone noticing. Furthermore, the photos Kraft had of the murdered men had to be developed somewhere over the years. Yet no photolab ever reported these images to the police initially. It was thought that Kraft might have developed them himself, but he lacked a dark room and the necessary skills. The police were convinced that Jeff Graves, Kraft's ex-partner, was the perpetrator, but he died before they could question him, leaving the mystery unsolved. However, a breakthrough seemed to come years later when Bob Jackson claimed to have the answers after Dennis McDougal published his book, Angel of Darkness, about the California Strangler in 1991. Jackson contacted him, confessing to Jackson killed 2 hitchhikers with Kraft. One was in Wyoming in 1975, and the other was in Colorado in 1976. However, authorities in both states said they couldn't verify these claims. Jackson knew more about Kraft than he was letting on. He claimed Kraft's list only included the most memorable murders, and that the real number of victims was closer to 100. McDougal reported this to the police and provided interview recordings. The detectives questioned Jackson. Jackson was not believed. No murder charges were filed against him. He was eventually persuaded to check into a psychiatric hospital. Jackson gained notoriety when his claims were published in a Beach magazine article in January 2000. Meanwhile, Kraft sued McDougal and the Angel of Darkness publisher. Kraft claimed the book tarnished his reputation, portrayed him as sick and insane, and hindered his future job prospects. Kraft demanded $62 million in damages. The lawsuit was dismissed as frivolous in June 1994, putting an end to the fabrications of the California Strangler. Despite most of the bodies being found, 22 remain unlocated. The California Strangler shows no interest in aiding the investigation or expressing remorse for his actions. His sadistic crimes are as shocking as his ability to evade capture for a decade, instilling terror and leaving a bloody stain.